Hi, I'm Dave Hilowitz. So today we're going to be talking about this, the Korg Monotron. It's a tiny monophonic synthesizer with like a great sounding oscillator, a great sounding filter. It has an LFO and it's really great for sound design. You can use it to generate all sorts of squelches and bleeps and blips. But if you want to play a melody like you would on a conventional synth, it's pretty much impossible. And the reason for that is that instead of having a keyboard, it has this tiny ribbon controller, which is very imprecise. Today, we're going to see if we can fix that. I'm going to take my old Korg Monotron and modify it so that I can control it with a keyboard controller. One cool thing about the Monotron series is that it was designed to be hackable. A lot of the internal circuitry is done with super tiny components that are hard to identify and work with. Still, Korg labeled the circuit board so that people who want to experiment will know where to solder in order to get access to that internal circuitry. As a result, there's a whole world of people who have experimented just like I'm about to do now. There's a great webpage that's been up for almost 10 years now that contains the magic formula. It's basically this little add-on circuit you can build that will allow you to control the Monotron using CV and gate inputs. I'm going to start building that circuit right now, and while I do, I'm going to talk a little bit about what CV and gate are. So we're all familiar with MIDI. It's a protocol for sending information about musical notes from one device to another. It's more than that, actually, but I'm simplifying a bit for the sake of this video. Anyway, MIDI is digital. It's a bunch of ones and zeros, and those ones and zeros can be interpreted as a bunch of information about musical events. And for the most part, we use it to tell synthesizers what notes to play. MIDI was invented in the early 80s, but before it existed, there was actually another, more basic standard for telling synthesizers what notes to play, and that was CV, or control voltage. A lot of modular synths still use CV and gate inputs today. The way it works is, instead of sending ones and zeros, the controller keyboard sends a voltage, and depending on what voltage it sends, you get a different note. Okay, so the circuit is done. Here's how it looks. We've got 3 headphone jacks, which I'm going to use with standard Eurorack patch cables. Each one connects through to these header pins. There are not many components. There's a few resistors, a variable resistor here. That's it. Pretty basic. Try not to look too much at the terrible soldering job I did. Since my circuit won't have a MIDI input, I'm going to need a keyboard that can generate control voltages. In comes this magical controller, the Arturia Keystep. It's a nice, well-designed little keyboard, but where it really differentiates itself from all the other little controllers that are out there on the market is that it has CV and gate outputs. That means you can just plug patch cables directly from the Keystep into this janky circuit I just made, and it should work, actually. So we've discussed control voltage, but what is this gate that I keep mentioning? That's actually a much simpler kind of signal. It's just on or off. As we've discussed, the control voltage tells the synthesizer what notes to play. The gate signal tells the synth when to play. Basically, if it's on, the note is on. If it's off, the note is off. Pretty basic. Okay, so we've got our circuit. We've got our source of CV and gate in the form of the Keystep. Let's try this thing out. First thought, I can't believe this thing actually works. I did such a bad job on the circuit. But yeah, my second thought, of course, is this thing is horribly out of tune. And here's where things get a little complicated. For starters, this is an analog oscillator. As it gets warmed up, its pitch actually changes, which means every time I play with this, I'm going to need to turn it on and wait like 15 minutes for it to stabilize. Also, let's be honest, I'll probably have to retune it every time also. Secondly, in the world of control voltage, which is what we're using, there's no standard for which pitches match which voltages. It's pretty much the Wild West. Every manufacturer is different, although there is a common standard in that each octave the voltage should increase by 1 volt. So whatever pitch is produced by 3 volts, for example, is 1 octave lower than what would be produced by voltage of 4 volts, etc. Luckily, the circuit I built has a little variable resistor that can be used for tuning the pitch. Now, when I say tuning, I don't just mean like changing the pitch so that it, lines up with what we would expect for that key, although it does do that as well. When I turn this knob, it not only changes the pitch of the note, but it also changes the distance between the notes. So here's what I'm going to do. For the time being, I'm not going to worry about the pitch, the actual note at all. I'm just going to worry about that distance between the notes. So you see here, I'm going to hit a low C. And you can see it doesn't register as a C, but that's fine. We're not worried about that. Now, when I hit the high C, 1 octave above, it doesn't register at the same note. And that's the thing that we're worried about. If the distance between the notes were tuned correctly, those two notes would be the same, but 1 octave apart. Remember, right now, I don't care at all about what exact note they are. I just care that they're the same. So I'm just going to keep futzing with this little knob until I get an exact match. Okay, there we go. Of course, if I go down a few octaves or up a few octaves, the tuning is bad again. Remember when I said analog oscillators can be quite unstable? Sometimes the distance between the notes is actually different from octave to octave. And it's different for every oscillator, which means that in order to have an analog synth that's really reliable in pitch, you really need a smart circuit that is calibrated for your oscillator circuit so that it generates exactly the right voltage for the right note. Okay, I think we've got it as good as we can get. Let's try to make some music with this thing. Okay, so I want to start with my bass. I want something big and dark. On its own, the bass sounds like this. So yeah, it's a bit dry. I'm going to add some chorus and EQ. Also, I've been experimenting with this plugin. I think it's called the Raum, which is a reverb plugin by Native Instruments. I'm mostly just using the default preset. It just makes everything sound really huge. Okay, I think that sounds great. But before I can go, I need to tune it again. Okay, let's record a bass line. Okay, I like to get rid of the metronome as early as possible. I don't want to get too used to it. I don't want it to become like part of the song. Everything we're doing here, of course, is monophonic. We can't play chords. So instead, I'm going to use an arpeggiation to kind of establish the chord progression. Luckily, the Keystep has a built-in arpeggiator. Oh, we're out of tune again. Okay, I think this sounds pretty cool already. I'm going to pull in some drums from another project just so I have something to work against. Okay, let's record a lead. At this point, I'm putting the Raum reverb on pretty much everything. Okay, so I think that's it. As you can see, it's totally usable for making music, provided you're willing to like retune the oscillator every 12 seconds. It's a lot of fun to play. The obvious next question is, should you do this? Should you mod your Monotron if you have one like lying around somewhere? And the answer is, it depends. It depends what your goals are. If you're hoping to have like a playable melodic synth for making like synth lines or something, then No, I think actually is the answer. Yeah, the pitch issues will just drive you crazy. If you're looking for that kind of a sound and you're on a budget, something like the Korg Volca keys will get you way closer to where you want to be than this. On the other hand, if you're looking to do some experimentation and you don't mind that the oscillator's like a little bit out of tune sometimes, this is amazing. The Keystep also kind of like breathes a lot of life into it, because I can actually take MIDI from my DAW and route it through the Keystep and use that as like a MIDI to CV converter. There's actually a third patch cable, which I didn't even talk about in this video, which controls the cutoff to the filter. So it's quite a flexible setup actually. So in summary, for experimental purposes, I highly recommend doing this, and for conventional melodic synth uses, yeah, not at all. Okay. Hope you enjoyed this video. It'd be great if you could hit like, and if you've not done so already, now is a great time to subscribe. I've got a lot of videos coming out in January. Yeah, see you next time.